Ad Chats with Frank Palmer, the marketing, media, and communications talk show.
Well, today, Neil, good morning or good afternoon. I guess you're in Toronto, right?
Good after morning to you.
Yeah, right. Well, today on NABS Ad Chats, I have the pleasure of talking to Neil McOstrich, creative director and co-founder for the advertising agency in Toronto called Clean Sheet. One of the questions I wanted to ask, how did Clean Sheet name ever come about?
Well, the name Clean Sheet actually came from a hockey commercial that I had made for Phil Knight and Nike about 25 years ago. I'd inherited Eric Lindros. He was 17 years old. He was built like a superhero. He was the next big thing. And I wrote a commercial about the joy of stepping onto freshly flooded ice. Like when you're a hockey player and the ice is flooded with a clean sheet, and you step on it, you just feel hope and you feel like nothing's been written and you feel like everything is unprecedented. And that clean sheet of ice as a metaphor in hockey, I realized could translate to advertising because I begin every project by, putting a clean sheet of paper in front of me. And I thought, a lot of people would look at a clean sheet and say, wow, that's 2 cents worth of paper. That's not really a great name. But I'm more interested in the people who say the clean sheet is actually the possibility of anything and everything that hasn't been done yet. And so to me, it's incredibly inspiring. And it requires effort as well. It's not just something you aspire to, but you got to work at it.
Well, I would think as a clean sheet, it's for me, it was pretty simple because there's nothing on it until you create something.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I look at the paintings that are painting behind you. You might want to tell me a little bit about this. Pretty neat.
Yeah, this is a piece of art we created with Olympic athletes actually for Canadian Tire for a campaign called We All Play for Canada. You can see in the maple leaf here, um, there's about 8 different types of Olympic implements. You can see swimmers' goggles here and bike treads and such. You can see Damian Warner's track shoe to the one side of me, and that other abstract on the other side are actually badminton birdies in abstract. And we gave Olympic athletes white canvases and paint and the implements of their sport. And we said, create, if you want to run on it, trampoline on the canvas, you want to hit tennis balls into the canvas or whatever. And they created all this incredible art that we took as abstractions and built into something bigger. We created this flag because we were basically trying to show that Canadian Tire was an inclusive team. So we thought there were 8 or 12 athletes it took to make this piece of art behind me. So really the maple leaf is inclusive of Paralympics, Olympians, male, female, the whole 9 yards.
A neat idea. Did you ever reproduce it and sell them?
We took the Olympians art and we sold it for a Canadian Tire charity called Jumpstart at the end. So we used the campaign. It had utility as an Olympic campaign, and at the end we sold the art and plowed the money back into helping kids who couldn't otherwise get into sports get into sports. So it really had a nice ending as well.
Right. Now I know that your partner and co-founder, Catherine Frank, and you and I and her and had the pleasure of working together for a number of years at DDB. Is she still with you?
She's still with me. I met her at DDB. That was a really, really great experience for me, obviously, which is why I'm so happy to talk to you again. And Catherine and I have been partners in this business for 18 years.
That's a fair amount of time. How time goes by fast, eh?
Yeah, it sure does.
We were
It
talking
sure
about
does.
that yesterday, how fast, how did I get to be the age I'm at? It just seemed to snap like that, 20 years go by like that.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you agreeing to do this for Ad Chaps. As you're aware, our industry is going through different times, some challenges, and we'll talk about this a bit later. And I'd like to hear your point on that and talk about maybe I talked to a guy the other day and I asked him, I said, a creative guy, and I said, "What do you feel about the industry today?" He said, "I feel like there's lots more opportunities than ever before." And I said, "Well, you're the first guy that I've run across that have said that." I said, "That's pleasant to hear." So we'll talk about that a little bit later and the challenges you see as well as opportunities going
Sure.
forward. Also want to add to our viewers that the interview for me, I say this is maybe one of the most important and interesting ones that I've done to date, or at least I hope it is, because when I read the background on you and having you work with me and for me for a number of years at DDB, that the background information you provided was more than I've received from many other interviews that I've done. And it really really gave me a very clear image of your talent, and the information was pure poetry.
Oh,
I
thank you.
mean, I could almost do a painting of you after I read through that. So if I was a potential client, seriously, I would have hired you based on all that information without even seeing anything, you know?
I should be so lucky.
Yeah. But first, I want to give the viewers a little bit of background on information on you. You were born where? In Toronto?
I was born in Toronto, yes.
And you're married, of course.
I'm married almost 40 years.
Oh,
Um,
no
born in
kid.
1963, born in 1963, which only becomes a really significant date when you have to try and scroll down to find your year, you know, if you're trying to get into a website and you realize you're old when you're thumb scrolling for a good, 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, mine doesn't go that far anymore. How many kids do you have?
I have two children. I have a almost 35 and an almost 30-year-old. So
It's
my
hard to
son
believe.
works for my son works for the Export Development Corporation in Ottawa, and my daughter is a copywriter following in my footsteps.
Oh, does she
Now,
work for an agency or a client?
yep, she works for an agency now called Diamond. She just moved to Diamond from No Fixed Address, and she's doing really well.
Well, No Fixed Address is another agency that I haven't interviewed yet, but I know that they're doing quite well.
They are. They
Yeah.
are.
Now, are you Irish?
I'm Canadian, but my parents are Irish, so I guess I have genetically, I have some kind of storytelling gene residing in my body.
And do you go out and celebrate like most Irish on Irish Day and
I do. I
get your
do.
yeah,
Yeah, I like the Irish culture. It's very friendly. It's almost like the entire nation is talking to the entire nation over a fence. I
have
kind
you
of
ever
feel
been?
like
You been to Ireland?
I have been to Ireland, yes, and I intend to go back next year. Actually, I'm going back in September.
Never been, but I would love to go and visit some of the pubs, you know. Probably
There's
never get out
Yeah,
of them.
and the air is incredible. Like the air, the ocean air, and the rain, and whatever you just breathe it in, and you rejuvenate. If you're tired, you're no longer tired. It's
Oh.
incredible.
So what schools or colleges or universities did you attend?
Well, I was a graduate of Upper Canada College, and then from there I went to the University of Toronto, and I sort of like was studying English and urban planning, funnily enough, but it wasn't really my passion. And I would write exams in hockey arenas with 1,000 other people. There'd be so many people in the exam room writing in the hockey arena that when the papers got turned over when they said you may begin, there was actually like an actual sound, a whooshing sound of papers turning over. And I thought, wow, and all these people are going to graduate and do what I do. And I just felt I was falling into a very predictable cadence of, okay, I guess I'll become a lawyer now or what have you. And that's when I sort of decided I would explore my creative side and see if I couldn't, do something a little bit more innovative and creative with my life.
Yeah, well, I read that you started somewhere as a receptionist
I
in
did. I
1980,
did.
and you said I read that you said that job gave you an opportunity to examine everyone around you.
Yeah, yeah, it was back in the day before like automatic voicemail, so every message came through me. So like if the angry wife was calling the husband about an affair, if an account was about to be lost, if something interesting was happening, or like, I mean, basically, I had to write down the messages. So you tell him this, and I would write it down. I would put it into a little cubbyhole thing and put it in these little pigeonhole cubby things that existed where people would come back and get their messages. So, like, I literally, in an unvarnished way, knew everything and saw everything that was happening in the agency. It was fascinating.
Maybe you would have made a good detective.
Well, I can't say if it would have made me a good detective, but what it did was it gave me a real appreciation for every aspect of the agency.
Right.
The business workings, but also the shenanigans. And
Yeah,
agencies are a combination of shenanigans and business workings. That's what makes them interesting.
that's true. Yeah, and then the other agencies that I've got a list on include Hayhurst, Skelly, McCabe Cloves, so Sloves, McLaren, BBDO, and then Palmer Jarvis DDB, which became DDB. Is there any that I missed?
No, not really. No, they were all in their own way really incredible agencies. You know, Scally McCabe Slows, for example, when I worked with Gary Prouk, I felt the agency was incredibly cerebral. When I worked at McLaren for Bill Durnan was full of energy, and I learned that advertising could move from cerebral to getting behind somebody with energy. When I worked with you and for you those many years, I learned that advertising could be fun and a little bit naughty and maybe not take itself so seriously. Like we were sort of the toy department of the business world, and we could embrace that. We could understand that we did things that clients themselves could not do, and we could have fun doing it. And at the end of the day, that was great.
Yeah, and the thing today is that I try to still have some fun where I can, because fun is almost losing out today, more so than I'd like to see it. I remember when I did some work with Vickers and Benson, which I had some fun with, and that's where I've learned from Terry O'Malley and Bill Bremner at the time,
Yeah.
kind of like icons to me. And I would go to them like mentors, and I'd say, hey, the company is somebody's driving me crazy. I can't figure it out. And then Bill would say, you can't figure that out. This is what, and I go, why can't I figure that out? Well, he said, I've lived this long and a lot longer than you, and that's what the guy's doing for you. He's driving you crazy for the following reason. I also remember you at the agency were quite a hockey fan. Do you still play some hockey?
Yeah, I love the game. I love what it represents. Again, you can't be called clean sheet and named after a hockey commercial for Nike and not enjoy the game. I still travel every year over to Europe. I take 2 weeks off in January and we travel with a traveling team. We play, and I've played from Russia to London. We meet with other teams. We play with them. We go for beers after and go for dinners after. And you realize, for all the sort of the politics, I was a bit worried last year. We were going into Austria, and I thought, oh, wow, the Austrian politics are really right and really, really difficult. But they weren't really. A lot of what we hear on the news in terms of politics are overlays that media outlets put on things to try and create dissension between two people. But ultimately, we would play hockey together. We would have beers in the dressing room together. And I realized that we're all a lot more alike than we are different. And if we take the time to understand each other, we can have a great time with one another. So these hockey trips, hockey is the exercise, but the real trick to the trip is just to sort of enjoy all other culture, to commune with people and realize we're not so different after all.
That's a very good comment. So are you a fan of the Leafs or Boston Bruins or?
I'm a suffering fan of the Leafs. I get very frustrated by them. So I've had I've had the hook pulled out of my mouth for so many years now with all these promises of everything that my new mantra for the Leafs is asterisk 82, which means I'll see you at the end of the 82nd game when the playoffs start on game 83. I don't want to hear about scoring titles. I don't want to hear about any records or any hoopla before the 83rd game. I'll see you in the playoffs, because that's really all they have to prove. They don't have to prove to anybody that they can play well during the regular season. They've done that. The problem is it's not translating into the playoffs when it really matters. So we'll see them in the playoffs.
Well, I kind of feel the same way about the Canucks, but we'll
Absolutely.
see. And I remember you worked on a really good campaign called We All Play for Canada, and really did some good work there. We'll talk about that a bit later, but you, what inspired you? I think we talked a bit about it, but what inspired you other to get into the business really? Was it not doing the other things that you saw? I mean, like I came out of I had about three jobs that I wanted to take on, which I felt that one, I was a big enough kid. You get a little shrink as you get older, but out of high school, I was 6'1", 220. So I wanted to be a wrestler. I wanted to be a cop, but I went to art school, and then I became a commercial artist. So what year did you actually decide? Was it, you said 1963? Was it the year that you got into advertising?
Well, 63 was the year I was born. I'm not that old, although, it was around 1986. I got out of university and I was working receptionist in this agency.
Right.
And truth be told, I'd watch the people come and go every day. And there were a group of people who came into work with a smile on their face every morning. And then every time they left, they had a smile on their face.
Right.
So I said, what's going on? Who are they? As opposed to the other people. I'd say, well, they're the creative department. So I said, well, something must be going on there because they look like they're having a whole lot of fun. So on my breaks, I'd venture to the back and I'd say, hey, like, you guys look like you're having fun. How do I get in on this? And they said, well, you got to have a portfolio. So I started to build a portfolio and they kind of helped me out a little bit. And, working nights between jobs, I started putting together my portfolio and eventually I scored a job in the business and I guess the rest was history.
Well, you had a saying that a graphic saying that I read somewhere, and you remember saying the business was in the toilet. You remember?
Uh, if I didn't say it, I probably thought it. So I'm not going to run away from it.
I said I'll how I'll remember a year that will soon forget. I think I read that as a quote somewhere in some of the information. And then you said the year that you said being the greatest disruption of our lives. Do you remember saying that?
That may be entirely true as well.
Well, anyways, through these interviews, as you know, we're trying to bring more awareness to nabs because of the industry and where it's at, and trying to raise the financial support for those in need. So I thank you again. Um, I when I first reached out to you, if you remember, to do the interview, I asked you to provide a resume on your life and the history, and I tell you that you really gave me so much information, more so than any other person I've asked to do this. And it was hard for me to pick and choose. So if I had to do this interview, it could take 4 hours rather than the hour that we've had. So um, one of the things that I read was Clean Sheet was named one of the 50th, Canada's 50 fastest growing companies and one of the best places to work, which is great. And you've won 5 Agency of the Year awards. Is that true? Right?
Correct over the years, yes.
When was the last one?
Oh, the last one was probably with you.
Oh, wow.
I
Well,
think so.
yeah. Well, we won a few of those over the years.
We did, and it was a
Yeah,
lot of fun. And we won it on big work too. I think what I'm most proud about was, it wasn't like we went out and found accounts that would let us be creative that we wouldn't be paid for. We did big work on Budweiser, we did big work on Panasonic, we did big work on Pine Sol, which is Clorox, which is about as difficult to dive as you could imagine. And that's what I'm most proud of. When I when I started in the business, I said to myself, I wanted to do work of significance for clients of significance. It was another mantra that I rallied around, which was kind of what made us different when we founded Clean Sheet, because most small companies in their fledgling state have to go out and find accounts that really don't pay, that are creative opportunities. And we did it differently. We said, no, we've got lots of skill in the boardroom at the highest levels of the corporation. So instead of doing that, what we did is we surrounded ourselves with all the talent we knew over the years, and we just found a way to stay big, to work with big clients from the get-go, and not necessarily do the pet walker, dog walker route.
yeah. Well, I remember to get noticed many years ago, you do some charity work and
Yeah,
client that we'd do it as long as we could do the work we wanted to do, not the work they wanted,
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
now, of course, we don't do that anymore. At least we can't afford to do it anymore because the world has changed. But um, I was interested in, I don't know if you noticed, but Campaign Magazine came out to say they were going to create Agency of the Year award.
Yes.
Now
Yes.
that's going to go right up against Strategy Magazine, I would take it.
We're going to have another one, I guess. And we've got a lot of award shows going on. And boy, they're time consuming too. Like you would know this from Palmer Jarvis. Like it's people look at the creative work and go, "Wow, what a creative agency!" But there's a machine behind that, sort of working the PR, looking and entering the shows, and it's almost like an entire job
Yes,
to
it
do.
is. If I remember correctly, I had to control the cost at one point in time to a percentage because
Yeah, yeah.
uh, another award show, everybody wants to enter, and the price of entry keeps going up in the agency. And having worked for Omnicom, they go, no, you can't spend that much money on awards anymore, Frank, even though you'd like to.
Well, Frank, the sad comment on award shows is that it's really the only way agencies can be known to clients, right? Like the world is so parsed out, it's so dispersed that it's campaign magazines that almost inform clients about what to look for in an agency, which is a far cry. Like when my father was in the business years ago, there was a really beautiful billboard that came out for Campbell Soup, like in the 1980s, and it said "better than a sweater," and it was a sweater, but it was knit. It was Campbell Soup can knit out of a sweater. I'll send it to you if I can find it. But what was really interesting was my father himself, as the client, saw the ad as a billboard and said, that billboard is magnificent, and sought to find out who did that work. And based on finding out who did the work, gave them work at Ontario Hydro. There was a direct relationship between
Wow.
the client experiencing the advertising and rewarding someone for that. Whereas we've lost that connection now. Everything's sort of kind of arbitrary and it's a little bit mysterious.
Yeah. Well, I know when the interview is over that the majority of people that are watching will find out and know that you're one of Canada's best storytellers, just based on the conversation we've had so far today. And it was the ad lounge that you were named the best storyteller.
Yeah, I love telling stories. And what I love about stories and why I feel stories in advertising are gold is that a story is not a literal conversation with a human being. It's a lateral conversation. So if you tell them an interesting story, if your advertising is a story, what they'll do is they'll internalize that as almost stimulus and they will apply it to themselves. So every viewer who looks at that particular commercial will internalize it entirely differently. They will move the mind laterally as opposed to literally. And that's what creates stickiness. That's what creates brand affinity beyond all measure. We are humans after all. For all the technology and all the things that are popping up around us, we are bound to tell stories to one another and we share. That's what we do.
How did the name uh, Quiet Whisperer come about?
A quiet whisper. Did I describe myself as a quiet whisperer?
You said that you called yourself the Quiet Whisperer. Was it the ad lounge that coined that name? I don't know.
Oh, I think that was one of the art directors who actually coined that of me. I was on the speaking tour and I was doing a lot of speaking, and I realized I went to a lot of corporate speaking gigs, and I always felt every time there were always two speakers who would, like a Swiss Chalet convention or a FedEx convention, they always had two speakers who spoke. One was the Anthony Robbins type who came out and would say to the audience, "Good morning," and they'd say, "Good morning," and say, "I can't hear you," and then people were screaming, "Good morning." So he was the real salesy guy. And they always had a second guy who was more of a whisperer, like he told stories, he moved more laterally, he spoke in analogies and things like that. And I always found myself drawn to the second speaker. And so I found storytelling and not shouting, but sort of whispering through relevance was a good way to do it. Like a lot of clients out there, they want to make big work. They think big work is the way to get noticed, like make my commercial bigger. And they're all trying to outbig each other. I've always believed that a great ad finds something really, really small but is very, very big in intent and meaning. So big ads to me are small moments made big.
I like that. You were the first Canadian to speak at the prestigious CLIA Awards in the U.S. and also Gathering Conference in Banff, and you were voted as one of the event's top two speakers. I guess you were the one that wasn't the other guy.
Yeah, well, I take the speaking very seriously. And in fact, in many ways, Frank, I got that from Keith Reinhardt, who, as you'll know, back in the day was the chairman of DDB when we were both there. And I remember he came to speak in Toronto. And the night before he was speaking, he made us go to the venue with him and he did a sound check and he did a rehearsal. And then the next morning, before the clients came in for the speech, he was there at 7 o'clock in the morning for a 9 o'clock speech. And what was he doing? Going through his notes and rehearsing. And then the moment he gave his speech was flawless. There were no notes involved, whatever. And everybody was awed and said, wow, how eloquently and beautifully he speaks. But what I got a chance to see was, to steal a line from Rod Stewart, his ad lib lines were well rehearsed. And I realized that being a great speaker requires effort and respect for the audience and respect for their time. So that's why I approach it almost like a combat sport. I take it seriously. I tend to do quite well at it because I honestly respect the time of the people on the other side.
Yeah, I mean I've been to a few of the uh, conversations with Keith and presentations with Keith and I've been there when he's been there early in the morning. I've been there when he's been at night. I've been there when he's coming down the sound checks, and he's just flawless, and to this day he still goes to the office every day, even though he's not getting paid, as he says to me. I'm not getting paid, Frank, but he goes to the office every day, and he's still a speaker in demand.
I love it. Such a nice
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Um, I remember you saying he had the line, and I think you also had it. Keith also said learn to listen more.
Hmm.
And you spoke about that again, where he's, you don't, if you're not listening, you're not getting all the messages. Keith said, most people listen about 25% of the time. And our business depends on hearing and correctly understanding what customers and clients need and want. And I learned from him, from a few other people where I take these lessons back. I mean, practice listening more, learn to listen, which is something I try to listen. People say, why are you so quiet in the room? Because I'm listening.
Well, look at the size of these puppies. You think these aren't capable of listening, first of all. So genetically, I guess I was born with that advantage. But the truth is, no great ad was truly ever created in a vacuum. Do you know what I mean? Like someone says something, someone comments on that, someone adds to that. Like I actually find if you're listening to the conversations and what people are saying, you create a really interesting pastiche of what the idea might be. Um, I remember going into SOS when we were at DDB and finding out from somebody who had been in the company for many, many years that the SOS, the scrubbing dish things was actually
Yeah.
so named for Save Our Saucepans and was created in 1934 around the time of the Titanic. And that notion of, I didn't know that, but that notion of hearing that and thinking SOS, I immediately thought of cooking disasters. And that allowed us to create an ad that was a very, very famous ad for SOS. And again, like, did I create it or did I just listen to somebody else give it to me and take it and translate it into something that consumers would enjoy? But it all began with active listening.
Yeah, I love stories about advertising, and obviously you being a storyteller, your comment on you said clients whose aspirations are bigger than their budget, you called them challengers.
Yes, I love those people.
You like those people.
I love challengers because challengers are Bill Gates is a challenger. I mean, you can be the richest man in the world and still feel you don't have enough to do what you want to do. And I love small companies with big aspirations. And I guess if you boiled it all down to what the trait was they all had in common, is to say challengers act with urgency. And I love people who act with urgency because I feel like the best work always comes out of those moments.
Yeah, the thing that I find today is I wish there was more clients that would take more of a risk and uh, there's a handful or maybe two handfuls of clients over the years that I can actually say I enjoyed working on that client. Where when I worked on Greyhound Air one year, it was an airline that we had a Greyhound dog that was trained to pee on a tire. And I remember having to pitch that ad to the client of about 25 elderly men that worked for Greyhound Air, and I had to stand up in front of them and pitch that commercial. And the dog would, and we trained the dog to do it, so it was a one take commercial that we had done. But I can remember the 10 seconds of silence. It seemed about an hour until one gentleman said, "I love that. It's the best commercial I've ever seen." I mean, for me, it was one of those spots that I just love, and I love the one where the little shreddies, diamond shreddies. They were so simple,
Yeah.
And so, what creative commercials do you believe, in your opinion, stand the test of time?
Well, I think the ones that are based on a human insight that doesn't change with time. So, I like commercials that aren't sort of beholden to fashion, which can change, or technology, which can change. I love the ones that are based on a sort of a simple human truth that is timeless 50 years from now as it would have been 30 years ago. So those are my favorite kinds of commercials. Very
Like
human.
like Apple 84?
Like Apple 1984, like What's Up. I mean, What's Up was a brilliant for Budweiser, a brilliant iteration of male bonding. Just in the simple words, What's Up. I loved it. And these are the types of commercials. I believe that they also really great commercials have lots going on within it. So like, in our industry, we like to talk about wear out a lot. Like the commercial wears out, it wears out, it wears out. I love the term wear in that, you can see a commercial you love, but every time you see it for the second time, the third time, or the fourth time, there's more you see in it. It's almost layered and it's rich and it rewards you every time.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more so from various individuals who worked on commercials of what they had to go through to get to the final product and trying to keep it as simple as possible. I know that you've worked on some great clients. Canadian Tire was one of them, and we're going to play a spot from that. You worked on Win Mobile, Caramilk, etc. Uh,
Yes.
so I'm going to play a short video here where you talk about storytelling. Would you play that for me, please?
My name is Neil McOstrich, and I'm a storyteller. For 35 years, I've been the quiet whisperer behind many of the world's most successful brand stories. I've helped these companies discover game-changing insights, translated their authenticity into campaigns that have made the cash registers sing, and inspired people to love their brands beyond rational measure. Now I'm stepping out of the shadows to share my principles, perhaps even a few secrets as to how I do it. And why now, you might rightly ask? I guess you might say, after 3 decades of success, you begin to see patterns, and more importantly, timeless truths that transcend the noise. These principles have survived QR codes, social media, augmented reality, the obsession with data, and whatever trend is clamoring for our attention next. And why? Because these principles speak to the heart, to the humanity in all of us that never changes. Let's talk about how 30 years of success can be put to use for you. Let's talk about insights. Let's talk about ideas and their power to accelerate your goals. Let's talk about a lot of things, but let's talk.
Wow.
Where'd you run that?
I ran that. I was gearing up to do a bunch of speaking tours, and then COVID hit. So I had all these films ready to go, and then literally the entire industry ground to a halt. And of course, speaking went along with it. And I tried a little bit online, didn't think it was the same thing. I needed the connection of the people in the room, to be perfectly honest. So I put it on a bit of a hiatus, and maybe we'll come back and do a bit more of that now that we're hopefully on the other side of whatever ailed us for those years.
I think it's still relevant. I loved it when I saw it, and I think somewhere you said, maybe you said it already, you said that the most successful campaigns that you've ever worked on or been a part of at first seemed risky, but weren't. And did you talk about some of your clients about taking a risk? Because the biggest problem I have is clients that want to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 1 pound bag.
Yeah.
And more stuff on and commercials to me, I don't even watch. I mean,
Yeah.
unless they're entertaining, I won't watch a commercial anymore. And
Well, I think as an industry, unfortunately we lie to ourselves a lot. Like we become so beholden to data, as if data has told some kind of a truth. And I have clients saying like, okay, give me a great storytelling ad in 6 seconds. It's impossible. But they want the story in 6 seconds, and they're at odds. And there are lots of data points that say every ad ever made was successful, but in our heart of hearts, we know it's not. So I try to sort of think like how I could best add value to corporations. And I think what I try and do is I go in and I say to them like, let me be the one person in your organization who sees your business with my heart and not necessarily the logic of the mind. Like, let me look at it differently on your behalf, because you need someone, every corporation needs someone like that who can look at them in ways they don't see themselves, because corporations tend to sort of say the same things to themselves, and they tend to drink their own Kool-Aid, and then they get inured to new and different. And that's why the work is so flat, because it just kind of party lines, like a brochure on film. Never works.
Yeah. You said where I read that you were talking about the bold positioning that the ROM, or Royal Ontario Museum, took. Was it work that you did, or was it you were speaking about work that someone else did?
Yeah, no, that was work someone else did, which I'm just as happy to give credit to. So, that was to me a great bit of judo flipping, which is, the ROM is full of dead things, fossils and things that really, like, if you want to get frank about it, they're dead things that don't matter anymore. And they took those dead things and said, actually, they're not dead things, they're immortal things, because those are things that have had a moment that are important to us important enough to us anthropologically that we're going to put them in a place. So the idea of like turning dead into immortal was to me a really great strategic flip that just opened up a whole world of opportunity for them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you just put a different spin on dead, and I find that interesting. What I said earlier was that a lot of clients are not taking the kind of risk that I think they should, and it becomes boring, and you don't have much time for me to be able to become comfortable with watching something where I'm interested, It's just a second or two. And of course, with TikTok and everybody else and young people today have got their 3 or 4 seconds of when they grasp something. I mean, it's hard to put something across. Not sure if the creative campaign for the Juno Awards was risky, but it must have been very challenging.
The Canada Sound one we did was extremely challenging. We worked with, what we did in this thing was we asked Canadians to go out and find the favorite sound that made them feel Canadian. And then what we did was, and tell us why. So it was really interesting. We heard things like, oh, I love the sound of jingling toonies in my pocket. I love the sound of hearing children say please and thank you, which I love the sound of bacon on a cottage skillet. I love the sound of a loon. And then what we did is we went out and we recorded all these sounds across the country from people aged 4 to 84, across every kind of religious denomination, sexual denomination you could imagine. And what we did was we built a website, and we donated all these sounds and sentiments to the Juno Award winners that year. And we said, make music with it. So if you were more of a Gordon Lightfoot writer and someone were writing about the delight they took in hearing rain fall off a cottage roof, you could write a song in that regard. If you were a beat maker, you could take the sound of a pileated woodpecker hitting a tree or what have you, and you could create music. You could turn it into beats and things like that. And we created an album with it. And we won a Billboard Award with that album. We were the only album, us and Drake, that managed that feat. And the funniest part is I'm not even musical. I couldn't play a tune to save my life. But I like music, and I like ideas. And once we had the idea, we just had to find the people who could fill the spaces and make it real.
Well, we have a little video here we're going to play.
The more visual our world becomes, the more other senses, like sound, and the powerful emotions they invoke, are left behind. The Canada Sound Project sought to correct this with an idea so collaborative it invited an entire nation to inspire its artists. It began by asking every Canadian to submit their favorite sound of Canada.
Here's one of my favorite sounds.
These sounds and the sentiments behind them were captured as a digital soundscape,
One of my favorite sounds is the sound of the ocean.
then gifted to musicians rights-free to create original tracks rich in meaning.
When I first heard about the Canada Sound Project, I thought,
Yes.
Engaging.
It's awesome.
Why didn't I think of that?
To increase engagement, Experiential Boost captured people's sounds. We partnered with CBC Music to create Canada Sound podcasts, nationwide broadcasts, and DJ mixes from the Canada Sound Bank.
For us, it's a
what's up, Canada? Contribute a sound. Inspire
Artists amplified with social media. The results? Music to our ears. 81 artists and partners ranging from national broadcasters to National Songwriters Associations and our equivalent of the Grammys, the Juno Awards, joined in. The project earned millions of impressions, including a feature in iconic Billboard magazine. But above all, Canada Sound created unexpected collaboration. Where else could one Canadian's love of hearing rain off their porch inspire an R&B artist thousands of miles away to use that inspiration to write a song of longing? Or a wolf howl sent from the far north inspire a band in Toronto to reimagine a centuries-old East Coast folk song. The project resulted in an album featuring everything from multi-platinum artists to an unknown 13-year-old who is now climbing the charts. All in support of a charity that puts instruments in the hands of kids who need them most. Canada Sound was the ultimate collaboration, creating a digital platform fueled by emotion and imagination that broke down barriers across age, race, geography, culture, language, even musical genres to bring Canadians together through sound.
Well done.
Wow. Does that ever make me feel wistful right now? Because that was one of the most fun projects. I've always said, Frank, that like when the stuff that I'm most proud of in my career, I can't even believe I got paid for it. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain point where you just do something that you're so personally vested in, that you enjoy so much, it doesn't even seem like work. And then it's almost like a dream that somebody actually found value in what you did enough to pay you for it. That to me is the advertising on its best day for me.
We have a bunch of graphics that we also found that was used for that campaign, which I think are really neat.
Yeah, loved
I
it.
mentioned, and we talked a bit about Canadian Tire and the campaign that you created for We All Play for Canada. I'm going to play two spots here for our viewers, both wonderful spots with great emotion, feelings, and human insight. In fact, I love these two spots. So let's just run these two spots right now.
Our toes are cold, your spirit's bolder. There's no weight that you won't shoulder. You're always there to lend a helping hand. For every smile you see us showing, our nation grows, strongly knowing we all play for Canada. We all play for Canada. Hey. Hey.
I pick up a broken comb, run it through my thin gray hair. Though I don't have any plans tonight, I'm not going anywhere. Well, I should have seen this coming.
Come on.
Don't know why I'm surprised.
When the best of us steps up, our nation stands a little taller. We all play for Canada.
Great.
Boy,
Very, very emotional. I know that it had great results because employee morale went through the roof.
yes.
More important, I guess, importantly for the company, besides that, was that the stock prices went up.
Yeah, when we did the campaign, We All Play for Canada, they measure everything. But they were actually the campaign succeeded in, there's 88,000 employees and associates in that company, and they were all feeling incredibly proud. But there was no other activity that would account for the stock price increase other than the campaign itself and how that made people feel about the company. So, there are a lot of people for a lot of years who have advocated that a brand should actually be on a balance sheet of a company, like it's not necessarily the brand value. But when brands get it right, they do add value to the corporation. They do accelerate goals and make people feel prouder and stand a little taller when they do their jobs. So again, that work to me was a labor of love, particularly the kid in the wheelchair one. I absolutely loved it. We took a risk. You want to talk about taking a risk? Very few people would make a commercial about a kid in a wheelchair because they'd be afraid to get it wrong or be criticized for it. We found that boy. He, in fact, was in a wheelchair. He was a terrific actor and a lovely kid. And we made that ad, and it was viewed over 300 million times organically around the world. And we were told that it was shared back when sharing was measured 4.2 million times, which for perspective would be 10 times, if you took the top 10 Super Bowl commercials of the year and how much they were shared when that commercial ran, we'd be twice that number. So it was a global phenomenon. And I spent my whole life, I guess, we all trying to go viral, but going viral is like falling in love. The harder you try to go viral, the more you fail. The only way to truly go viral is to try and do the right thing and set the conditions for something really, really human, and then let people take it from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll talk to you a bit off camera about something. But right now, when did you decide to become an author?
I think I wrote that book. I never intended to write a book. Like you, Frank, I'm full of stories, and I've always considered stories of winning or even stories of losing, as long as I learn something from it, really, really valuable. And I was flying from Toronto to Dusseldorf once on a business meeting, and I thought the guy beside me had served up a giant book and parked it on the armrest between us, which I think was his way of saying, I'm not in the talking mood. The movies on the plane were terrible. I think it was a Jennifer Aniston B-level rom-com, was about as good as it was going to get. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? Watch a shitty movie I don't want to watch and drink too much and get off the plane feeling like a bag of nails? Or am I going to write that book? And so I pulled up my computer and I literally wrote the book between Wheels Up and Wheels Down, which was about 8 hours and 32 minutes between Dusseldorf. I wrote the bones of the book, which was essentially to say, I poured out all the stories that would come to my mind in that moment. In other words, I thought whatever was important to me would bubble up, and that was the formation of the book.
Yeah, I enjoyed one of the things I enjoyed in the book when I read when it said it's impossible to manufacture cool. Cool is just that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It can merge as the shadow of unlikeliest things. Everyone marveled at James Dean's cool squint, but in truth, it was squinty because the sun was in his eyes.
Right.
Unbelievable. But that magic moment like that you get that camera and they got a picture and things can happen in an instant like that. And they weren't planned to be anything but that, you know?
Yeah. And that's why it still resonates that Keith Reinhardt, used to always say, you can't storyboard a smile. Like sometimes, the best way to find cool is just to be present and let things happen. And then you look for a moment and go, that was fantastic. What else can you do? So I used to, when I was not failing in the business, but when I was younger and I didn't know what I was doing, I would try and write very prescriptive scripts with dialogue. And I realized later in my life, the best way to get a good commercial was not to write the dialogue for them, but to create the situation in which they could be themselves and provide the dialogue. So it was more, you create a situation to be filmed as opposed to a very specific dialogue.
Could you write a book called Hustle about the telco pitch that you did with the Wind? Could you do a book?
I could write a book about that. I mean, that was a fun story of hustle because we won the biggest pitch in the country that year for the telco, but we weren't even on the list. All the big predictable agencies were on the list and we had just started Clean Sheet. We couldn't get on the list, but I called the guy who was on the committee and he said, oh, I can't come and see you because, I've got to catch a plane to fly back to Europe tonight. And so I said, basically, okay, I'll tell you what, if I pack your bags for you and I deliver your bags to the airport and pick you up in a limo, as opposed to making you take a cab and I can save you 40 minutes, would you meet me at the airport? And he said, absolutely. So we basically just saved him time at the 11th hour. We met in the airport for 40 minutes. And on the basis of that, we got put on the list. And then we hustled our asses off and won the pitch as well. And the rest was history. We created when Wind was created, it was an incredible company. At one point, we had 50% of every new cell phones sold in the country were going to Wind.
Yeah.
Which was extraordinary from scratch. The brand was created from scratch.
Well, good for you for taking the time and energy to do that. But importantly is the story. The TV spot for Loon Rise Forms is an example of where storytelling again was silent, but the spot says it all: passion and hard work. Let's play that. Sounds again, eh?
I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of that commercial and the work we did on that because, 420 is become this big, big party. And, if you want to stand out in 420, it takes big money. Everybody's scrambling to tell you to buy their stuff. And, here we had this little client that basically they were cannabis producers, which is a fancy way of saying they're farmers. And, we thought, there is no 420 without these guys getting up in the dead of the night and doing what they do. And the shelf stockers who stock it, you never see people stocking stuff during the day because they do it in the dead of night. And the people who are innovating and the people who are keeping the product safe. And there's a whole industry that existed in the shadows that made 420 safe. So with a really, really simple refraction of celebrate 420 becoming celebrate 420 AM, I think we did a pretty decent job of carving out white space for our client. We let everybody else fight over the party, and we said, actually, when you're tired of the party, please come to realize that there's no day without these folks here. They're good people.
The thing for me is, as I opened up in our conversation, is that we could go on for another 2 or 3 hours because I'm really enjoying our conversation and about the passion and the creative that you put into things, the story whispering, but I want to leave us some time for a couple of questions here from a couple of the people that have asked. So,
sure.
One of the questions is, what do you believe is the key in nurturing creativity and innovation within a team, especially during challenging times like we have now?
I think if you want to keep the innovation and the creativity flowing, you've got to keep the environment fun. And I think you have to keep it safe. I mean, you have to create a safe space where people can sort of put ideas up and, they'll put something on the wall. Like the worst thing you can say to a creative person is that's stupid. You just let the ideas go up and then people build on those ideas. I think you have to kind of enter with a clean sheet and an openness to what can be. And I think if you do that and you keep it loose and you realize, I remember there was all sorts of angst in our business about was I the writer of that ad? Was I the art director of that ad? Was I the creative director of that ad? And what if it was a writer, but what if it was a visual ad that didn't have words? Could I still be the copywriter on the ad? I shifted my thinking on that early on in my career. And I said, my contribution to that work has to be DNA. If my DNA is credibly in that work, I'm going to be incredibly proud to talk about it. So sometimes it was as a writer. Sometimes it was as a writer doing something that had an art direction feel to it. And sometimes it was a creative director who didn't even come up with the idea, but flew like a human shit shield in front of it and guided it through and made it real. Do you know what I mean? And in every case, your DNA is indelibly vested in that work. So I think that took a lot of pressure off. The ownership of the work, because I think if your DNA, everybody can contribute DNA to a great piece of work. If they basically enter with an open mind, if they're collaborative, they're not too precious about their thoughts. I think you can get to a great place.
Good answer. What advice do you give to someone just starting off in the industry today?
I would say to them, be curious. Be curious, stay curious, be sickeningly helpful, and sponge all you can off the older people who have the wisdom. One of the things that I always did when I was in the agencies was I made myself available, like I did my job, of course, but in between doing my job, I made myself available to the people at the senior levels. And I would often go to the creative director and say, is there anything on your plate that maybe not is terribly sexy, but is bothering you? Or are you losing sleep over something? And they'd say, yeah, this is bothering me, or I can't figure this out or figure that out. So, I did my job, but I always found a way to make myself helpful and manage up and help make the problems of the people above me go away best I could. So I think that's pretty good advice.
Well, I'd like to continue talking about this, but we're going to run out of time a little bit. But from my research on you and your company, and I'd like to say that your clients are very lucky to have you as their agency. You inspired me, and that takes a bunch.
Well, thank you. I certainly love working with you, and it was wonderful to reconnect. I hope people can find a shred of meaning. The entirety of the length of our thing will be one thing, but I always say to people, like, if you find one sentence or one word within it that makes your day all the better, then this thing has been a success.
The final line that I will say here is I really like the line where you said, great insights are wasted on clients too small to make an impact. Great budgets are wasted on big clients without anything to say. Sometimes the best times you get it right on all fronts. Seems to me that all your clients want.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%.
So on behalf of NABS, I'd like to thank you, and I know that the viewers will really enjoy this conversation. At least I hope they will. I know that I have, and I thank you for taking the time today to talk with me.
Well, great. I appreciate the time as well, Frank, and I think NABS is an awesome organization. So I wish you continued success, as you help the industry, because we need the help. We need to be together. Tough times.
Thank you.